Hello and welcome to the Rask Network. What you're about to hear and see is limited to general financial information only. Please be sure to speak to your financial planner or refer to our financial services guide available at rask.com.au/FSG before acting on the information.
Hello and welcome to the Australian Finance Podcast. I'm your host, Kate Campbell, and today I'm chatting with Dinah Rowe Roberts. Dinah is the co-host of the top-rated how-to podcast, Life Admin Hacks, co-author of Life Admin Hacks, and co-creator of the Art of Adulting online course. Her aim is to help people win back their time, which is something we love talking about here on the podcast, save money, even better, and reclaim their headspace. Today, we're going to talk about making adulting just a bit easier and some useful strategies to get on top of that dreaded life admin. So let's jump in. Dinah, welcome to the podcast today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Now, why does adulting feel so hard these days? So this is probably going to be a very hard question for you to answer, but I just feel like everything feels like a lot, and there's always something we aren't on top of that we have to get on top of.
Yeah, I think it's a fair comment. And I'm going to show my age a little bit here, but when I first started working, I got my paycheck in an envelope. I paid my electricity bill from the one government-owned provider that existed, so there was no choice. I watched free-to-air TV, and I had one landline phone that, I shared with my housemates. That there was no streaming, no choice of electricity provider, and only occasionally would you get on a mailing list or, sales promotion. So in our current world, we've just got way more choice. So utilities, health insurance, thousands and thousands of choices. We've got more regulations, like you even need a license to fish these days. So all of these things, there's lower cost to communicate from all of these providers. The joy of online shopping brings with it its own administration. So all of those things have made adulting more complicated and a far greater administrative burden than we used to have.
That's an interesting one to think about. Like when our parents were growing up, they didn't have all these choices and decisions they had to make every day. They weren't bombarded. Like if they wanted to be advertised to, they probably had to listen to the radio or go to the shops, whereas we're just getting it whether we like it or not, coming into our inbox and popping up on our social media sites.
Yeah, definitely e-commerce brings with it a lot of noise, if that makes sense. So it's amazingly convenient to be able to do online shopping, but then you get signed up to mailing lists, which require you to either filter through or unsubscribe. You usually buy things that need to be returned, which requires more filling out and more trips to the post office and all of those things. Whereas in the past, we used to physically go there, but it was over once and for all. Whereas when you have e-commerce, it's often in lots of 5-minute intervals of tasks, which might in aggregate take a lot less time, but they require more of your cognitive effort to remember to do all of those things in the time that, you need to get them completed.
What got you so interested in life admin and how to do it better? Because it's kind of an interesting thing to specialize in or really go deep into.
Yeah, so it's one of those great stories. Our 2 old high school friends, we went away for a long weekend, without our husbands, and we were all talking about the fact that, we were very experienced professionals working in senior jobs.
Really?
I was a director in a consulting firm. My co-author, Mia, was, quite senior in the design, user experience space. We're both excelling in our careers. At work, we're known to be super organized. And yet when it comes to our home life, everything's in complete disarray. I'd recently gone through experience of forgetting to take my son to a birthday party because the invitation got lost. We both knew we were overpaying for our utilities and insurances because we never shopped around to compare. We were having to ask our partners for permission to go out because we didn't know what each other was doing. And all of a sudden we were like, hang on, let's use our professional expertise to solve this problem once and for all. So we started a podcast to try and, document our journey. And it was really COVID, I guess, that pushed us over the edge, because during COVID, we wrote a book, which was published by HarperCollins. So that's when we really went deep into all of the solutions that we think makes a big difference to adulting.
Why do you think it's so important that everyone thinks a little bit more about their life admin instead of just reacting to whatever's coming up in the moment? Because I can imagine most people listening are like, oh, life admin's that thing I do when I have one day of annual leave or on a public holiday, or if I've got a sick day, I tick off a few tasks then, but it's not something I want to prioritize in my daily life.
Yeah, and I think that's the whole thing. We don't want to prioritize it either. That we became experts in life admin so we could minimize it, reduce it, make it a background rather than, the thing that's in front of you. The reality is that most life admin, it's inevitable. It's completely normal for people to procrastinate doing these kind of tedious, these overwhelming tasks. But actually, most people, you can sit back and actually say, if you're on top of your life admin, it actually is going to make your life easier. Mm-hmm. And what we also encourage you to do is to think about, for every person, it's slightly different why you want to be on top of your life admin. It's sort of about your values and goals in life. But if time is really important to you, being on top of your life admin will give you back time because you'll do it more efficiently. If money is something that's really important to you at the moment, then being on top of life admin will definitely save you money, particularly when it comes to all of that comparison shopping stuff for bills and services. And if you're particularly in a time of your life, a lot of our listeners are at a time of life with young children and they're feeling stressed and overwhelmed, and being on top of life admin can really bring calm and order to your life. So really making a little bit of investment up front, it's one of those things that will pay you back 1,000-fold, because if you get your systems and your environment set up in a way that makes it easy to handle life admin and you know how to deal with it when it hits you, it'll really have those payoffs. And I guess it depends on where you are and what's important to you and what the payoffs will be.
Even with your financial life admin, there's a lot of easy wins. If you haven't compared any of your bill providers for years, if you haven't called your broker or your bank to talk about your home loan rate, there's a lot of things that you can do, and you can save a lot of money by staying on top of these things. So if we start at the very beginning in thinking about how we have a life admin system, if someone doesn't really have any systems in place, hasn't thought about it too much before, where do you usually start people?
Yeah, so we love to talk about this idea of life admin foundations, and we think there's sort of 5 components that if you kind of get them sorted, they make all other life admin easier. So the first one is scheduling. So having a calendar that's a single source of truth that you can actually know and trust in. And if you're in a household situation and family situation, it's having a calendar that's shared with the other members of your family so they know what's going on. And you can also put into that important milestones that you want to schedule in or doing some life admin. So we recommend having an hour of power each week. That's where you tackle those chunky life admin tasks, and putting that in your calendar gives you sort of that grounding to focus on doing that work. The second one, which was one that transformed my life, which people think it's hilarious, but password management, and actually really getting on top of my passwords. And for me, that means paying for a paid password management app rather than relying on, the saving
Google
your
to collect all your passwords.
Yeah. And the reason why, for me, it makes a big difference is it makes it easy to share passwords with other members of my family. So it means that I'm not the only one who's got the Netflix password, or even worse, the insurance, the password for our house and contents insurance or our investments, so that my husband can just as easily log in and take action on a task, and that password is not the barrier for him taking action. And, really grounding my kids in terms of them knowing how to access their own accounts and take charge, but in a way that's shared seamlessly between us. So that's been a huge win for me. Our third thing is really thinking about going paperless and having a structured online filing system in the cloud, so either Google Drive or you might use Microsoft OneDrive, but a place where you store all your important documents. So whether it be Google Drive or you might use Microsoft OneDrive, but an online place that you can file your documents, important documents that you're going to need to come back to again and again, but in a place where you can share them again, but also that you can access them on your phone, on your computer, or maybe on your work computer on the go. So that's really important because it helps you know where to put documents where they come in, rather than just having them languishing in your email where you have to search for them to find them again. The next one is really having a good system for lists in terms of both to-do lists, but also other lists of information. And again, an online app, one that you feel comfortable with, that you know that you can easily add things to and find again. And finally, in our book, we call it budgeting. But I think as we've sort of evolved, what we really mean is just understanding your financial position, because it's not really about having a budget. It's just knowing where you are financially, because that helps you make better informed decisions about things like outsourcing, can I afford this, and make better decisions about money generally.
So it sounds like a lot of these things are just having a really good understanding of where all your information is and how to access it and how to share that information with other people. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think if you're in a relationship, having systems that put life admin into neutral territory, because even if you decide to divide tasks up, so in my relationship, I do tend to look after the financial side of things, and my husband does tend to look after the home maintenance side of things, but he can still access it. So if I'm not well, or if I've gone traveling and he needs to be able to get something, having a system where you can easily share that information without it being, a really big problem that you can't find what you're looking for. So yeah, I think if you're in a relationship and you're sharing your information, it makes a huge difference in terms of each being able to step in and help each other out.
Yeah, and that can be a reason why people don't help in a relationship, because one person has set up all the systems and has the passwords and has the documents, and the other person's like, well, I can't get into anything, so I can't help here. So both having access to all the passwords and the documents means that both of you can equally contribute to the task if needed.
Yeah, definitely. And, I certainly was in the position where I used to feel resentful of my husband not doing anything, but I had set up a system designed for one person rather than a system that was designed for two. So really when I did all of our life admin systems and created it, so it was much easier for us to share the load, it made a huge difference in that sharing of the mental load.
So once we've got these basics in place, we have our calendar in place so we know when we're doing different things. We've got some time set aside for life admin. We've got a general gist of our documents in the Google Drive. I'm a big fan of that, especially with tax documents, because it's so easy to just put things in a folder and lose track of them. But if we have a file, we can keep track of them during the year, and it just makes the headache a lot less at tax time. We've got a passport, well, that would probably help as well, but password manager. Where do we go next to that next level of life admin?
Yeah, so I think it comes back to where you are and like what's important to you right now. And so if you're at a time in your life when and this is where I am right now, it's all about saving time. I've got a full-time job. I also have my side hustle. I've got 2 teenage kids. I've really got to make the most of my time.
Yeah.
So for me, it comes to thinking about the life admin around household operations and like really making that run smoothly. So thinking about grocery shopping, meal planning, the kids' logistics, really thinking about those areas of life admin and honing in on that. But if you're in a stage of life where it's all about saving money, then you really probably want to be thinking about that comparison shopping side of things and really comparison shopping hard on every bill to really save you that money. Or if you're really at a stage of life where you're sort of a bit stressed out about a few things, you're feeling a bit anxious that you don't have a will, which many Australians don't, you haven't actually, you've got health concerns, or maybe you don't even know where your superannuation is, then maybe you want to start to focus on those areas to bring you back peace of mind, because those are the things that are maybe keeping you up at 3 a.m. thinking about those things. So I think it's really important just to figure out where you're at and then focus on the areas that are more important. And the reality is there's a lot of life admin to do. So it's unlikely that you're going to be on top of everything all the time. So you kind of just got to zero in on the area that's going to really help you out for what's important to you right now, the season of life you're in.
Maybe if we talk a little bit more about saving time, because I think that's something that would resonate with a lot of listeners. Most of us are working, we're trying to work on our investments, we're possibly doing some work on the side, we're trying to have a social life, we're learning, we're investing in our career. So if we can save time on things that don't bring us too much happiness, and maybe that's grocery shopping, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that most people fall into the trap of when it comes to grocery shopping is grocery shopping 2 to 3 times a week. I think if you look at the data for most Australians, they do grocery shop several times a week. And it really comes down to if you can actually cut that back to even, ideally once a week, but maybe twice a week. And if you can think about moving to online grocery shopping, those are 2 areas that will save you an enormous amount of time. But for that to be effective, you kind of need two things. The first one is you need a really good meal plan, because you need to know what to buy, and you need to know what nights you're going to be home, what nights you're going to be on the go, and, what nights, you've got things on where you might need a super fast meal. So having a system that you can meal plan once a week it's like the foundational part of getting your grocery shopping under control. And then thinking about, if you're comfortable doing online shopping, I certainly am. I barely step foot inside a supermarket these days. I think I went 1 year with only going to the supermarket once. Wow. Because I really have just embraced online shopping. And it makes a huge difference in terms of time, because it definitely becomes what I call a 10-minute time killer activity for me once a week. That because I've spent a bit of time saving some lists into my online grocery shopping app, I can easily do my grocery shopping, in between two meetings, or while I'm sitting outside waiting for my kids to pick them up or something, rather than it being, for most people, leaving the house, going to the supermarket and coming home. It's probably, minimum 90 minutes really, or 2 hours. And then I think that just had a huge difference in terms of my brain space, that grocery shopping. It's just, it's a very small thing. It just almost happens on autopilot.
Yeah, it has saved me a lot of time as well. It took me a while to get into it properly, because at the start I was just sort of planning the meals, doing click and collect without thinking too much about my calendar for the week. Yeah. And then suddenly I realized I had too much left over and I really don't want to waste food, or I didn't have enough and suddenly I'm running out of butter halfway through the week. So it was really taking stock of what I had. Then I had to actually look at my calendar and see what I was doing during the week, when I was in, when I was out. Even lunches, that was something I was forgetting at the start, like ingredients for lunch on top of dinner and breakfast ingredients. So it took a little bit of trial and error and making some mistakes and a few top-up shops, but I slowly got there, and it saves so much time now.
Yeah, and usually most people save money too, because you don't get sort of trapped by buying things that you didn't expect to buy, and that sort of thing. You can usually shop the specials really effectively online, because you can look at what things are on special, and although they might not have been on your list, you can stock up on things. And the evidence also says that that's the best way of saving money, is buying on special at Coles and Woolies is actually cheaper usually than buying at Aldi.
And you can compare prices a lot more effectively. You can see the unit price of different things, or, okay, that's this much per 100 grams, but this is this much. I don't really mind what product they get, therefore I'll get the cheaper one. So it does make a lot of things easier. How else do you save time with a busy household?
So I think one of the most important things for me is thinking about our schedule and and what's going on in the week, and trying to make things more efficient. So thinking about trying to put tasks next to one another that are in the same location, or I'm going to the same place, or those sorts of things. So being quite planned with our schedule. So every Sunday night we sit down as a family and talk about what's going on for the week. And then really divide up any tasks that are discretionary about who can do them, who's most convenient to do, that kind of thing. So I think definitely being top of our schedule actually is one of the best ways to save time.
What if someone has a partner who's a very resistant scheduler, and say they are listening right now and they're like, oh, yeah, I'm going to get all of this into place, but then the other person's like, oh, we don't want to micromanage everything in the schedule?
Yeah, so I think it's just like any other change management journey, and usually you're going to have to come to some sort of compromise.
I love these corporate words, change management journey.
Yeah. Yes. Well, it is like, I think, even in a relationship, it's change management, because you've kind of got to be realistic about what you're going to get them to change. And it's a bit of a journey that you've got to go on, because you've got to actually, first of all, get them to understand why the change is necessary. Yeah. So what it's going to mean to you and what it's going to mean to your family, and then get them to the place where maybe they've got some interest in changing. And then once they've got that interest in changing, then start to introduce them to the tools that you might be using to make the change, rather than, I think my mistake early on with my husband was to say, I've set up this password manager and you must use it at the end. Yeah. And he was like, well, of course didn't use it, because, he didn't know how to use it. He didn't know why he should use it. He hadn't come on the same journey as me in terms of learning what was going to be so more efficient. So it is a bit of them. I've been thinking about this. This would make a big difference. How about we try this? and then giving it a go, and continuing to tweak, etc. And then to, I guess, really reap the rewards of the success of it in terms of what that actually means. I think one of the things that we do a lot too that makes using the schedule quite helpful is we like to plan in fun. So we use our calendar to really plan our social life effectively.
Yeah.
So it's not just about all of the boring tasks. It's also saying, oh, look ahead a few weeks. In a few weekends, we don't have much on. What fun things are we going to plan to put on the calendar, so that it's not just about, we haven't just put on the calendar for this weekend to compare house and contents insurance. We've also put on, we're going to go to the movies. We're going to go and see our friends. We're going to go for this walk. We're going to do all these things. And then it becomes that central source of truth, not just of the, of the mundane, but also of the joy, because that's what you want to do all of that life admin for, is so you can have more of the joy.
Yeah, I like that. Doing both at once so you can both see the benefit of it. So even if someone's like, oh, I don't really want to systematize our life, well, it could actually lead to more time that we can spend doing fun things and going out, spending time with friends and having time together. So bringing up the positive side of doing all of this as well.
Yeah, and you can even schedule in free time. So that's one thing that we went through for a while, is actually when we felt like we were packing too much in, and our life just felt a bit chaotic. And we're like, actually, you know what? Every weekend we need 3 hours of free time, which is to do whatever we want. So we actually, ironically, scheduled it in, because that meant that you didn't overschedule yourself. You didn't commit to one more thing or taking a child here or doing that. You're like, no, that's actually our free time. We're going to have some downtime. So, you can also approach it in lots of different ways that's going to work for you and your family.
I remember when I interviewed Nia Ayal for the podcast, and he was talking about how we all feel this guilt for watching TV or reading in the evenings when we feel like we could do anything else. And he was sort of saying that, well, just schedule in this time, maybe calling it free time to waste, because if you are scheduling in this time, then it's not wasted time and it's not something you need to feel guilty about. It's part of your overall life.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that a lot of people who sort of talk about that they don't have any time and they don't have any fun and their life's kind of a bit, haven't actually made that effort to schedule themselves in, like they're sort of at someone else's schedule, so they haven't written it down. But what that means is that often you're sort of working on everyone else's schedule, not your schedule. So, having that your own deliberate schedule, I think, can really change the game in terms of you're living your life more in line with your values and what you want to do rather than what everyone else wants you to do.
I'd love to know your thoughts about lists, because I have thought about lists a lot, tried to reinvent the way I manage my tasks, but I've still gone back to the paper list or the whiteboard list that I can cross off. And I know you've got a whole chapter in your book about it. So do you think they work? Have they worked for you? Have you got some better ways to do lists?
Yeah, so I think the first thing to think about is that lists come in 3 types. And often people have a list that's made up of all of these lists mishmashed together. And I think that's sometimes where things go wrong. So the first is to-do lists, which are, your action lists. And maybe I'll come back to that one at the end, because that's kind of the traditional list that everyone sort of knows about. But there's also other lists. So there are checklists. And those are lists that help you do things efficiently again and again. So think, a packing list for when you go on holiday, or, the things to take when you take your child to swimming lessons, or those sorts of things. And checklists are really helpful for saving time, actually. So, and, not messing things up. I've got a great one for when we go camping. I've got another great checklist for preparing the house to go on holiday. I'm less worried about the packing list, but more like remembering to cancel the newspaper delivery and to organise the dog and to empty the fridge and empty the rubbish bins and all of those sorts of things. So sometimes people have those mishmashed together. The other lists that often people have are reference lists. And these are things that you want to refer back to, but you might never do. So I've got reference lists for podcasts I want to listen to, books I want to read. So things that I want to remember, but I don't necessarily need to do them. And so I think when you mishmash those lists together, then it gets hard to know how to prioritize the actual to-do list, because there's things in the list that you don't need to do. You just want to remember them. So think about dividing your lists up into the 3 types. And then I think when it comes to to-do lists, we recommend that your to-do lists have 2 to-do lists. So one which are called like 10-minute time killer tasks. So those are the little bits and pieces that you can't do immediately when they hit you because they take more than a minute, but you need to do them at some point. And think about those 10-minute time killer tasks and think about when you might find those dead 10 minutes to do the list so that you can take action on them. And then when you think about more chunky tasks, so when I'm talking about life admin, I'm talking about hour of power type tasks, have a separate list of those, but then also make sure you've got time scheduled in your calendar to make the time to do those tasks, because otherwise you can't squeeze those in anywhere. You're not going to be able to find the time to do them unless you've got time in your calendar. And some people like to not put those in a list at all, but like I think Nir Eyal, he's a big fan of actually just scheduling that task into your calendar. But I still like to keep a list of my hour of power tasks because sometimes life gets in the way. And if I schedule in the calendar, then I kind of might lose that task, if that makes sense. So, but if you separate those tasks into how long they're going to take, it also helps you know when you're going to do them. So I think those are the things that have made the biggest difference for me in my list management. And I guess finally, don't put things on a list that you could do straight away. Just do them. 2 minutes too easy, we call them. I think don't open your email inbox unless you've got 2 minutes to do the likely 2-minute task that lurks there, because that's just, multi-handling of adding it to a list when you could have actually just got it done.
I like the idea of separating out reference lists, because there's so often people say, oh, you should really listen to this episode or watch this show. And then I just kind of put it on my list because where else do I put that document, that information? And then suddenly it's not something I plan to do in the next week or so. So it just sits there for ages and it just sort of takes up mental space.
It does.
Yeah. And what about incorporating we talked a little bit about getting our partner on board, but when you're trying to save time, save money, have a system and getting the whole family on board, apart from scheduling, how else do you do that so you're not taking on all of that mental load yourself?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest things is in lots of relationships, there's usually an over-functioner and an under-functioner. And so in my relationship was definitely me. So I used to leap in to solve everybody's problems all the time. Even when I had said, given a job for my partner or my kids to do, if they didn't do it exactly as I wanted in the time frame which I thought it needed to be done, I would leap in and rescue them and then feel resentful that they hadn't done the task. And so you kind of have to let go of that. Well, you absolutely have to let go of it. You have to set really clear expectations and go through these conversations about what's important. And then when they don't deliver, you have to not step in and rescue them. You have to let the natural consequences play out, even if it's frustrating for you, even if it's going to cost you a bit of money. Because if you can continuously step in to rescue someone, they'll never change their behavior because you're just continuing to, get them out of the hole. So, I definitely encourage you to think about staying the course, handing the task over and just letting the natural consequences play out.
It can be very tough to delegate those tasks if you've been doing them yourself for ages. But then on the other hand, you might end up taking on every single task and just be taking the stress away from everybody.
Yeah, and I think you need to agree the sort of minimum acceptable standard of like a task when you sort of agree to delegate it or hand it over to another member of your household, to say this is the bare minimum that it needs to be done to. Both agree that that's like the minimum standard, the minimum acceptable standard. And then you have to just let go and let it play out, because otherwise, and this also helps you decide what you are willing to delegate. Because some things you might just decide, actually, I've got to just stop feeling resentful about it. It's really important to me. I want it done to a really high standard, and therefore I'm not going to let go of that task. But when you decide on the tasks that you do want to let go of, you actually truly need to let go of them. And you need to let go of any snide comments about them not being done to the standard. And you just need to let it flow naturally.
I feel like this conversation comes up a lot with friends when it comes to cleaning in the house in their relationship, because one person usually wants the cleaning done more often or to a higher standard or a certain way, and the other person is just like, it's just dirt, it's just dust.
Yeah, so it's a very common issue. And although cleaning in and of itself is not life admin, thinking about outsourcing cleaning does become life admin. And so there does come to a point where, you've either got to come to a compromise about what's the minimum acceptable standard and figure out a natural consequence, or you've got to start to talk about that decision about it's really important to me. You can understand it's important to me. So are we going to have to outsource this task? And if we are, we're going to both have to contribute equally to the payment of it. And I think, a cleaner is usually a lot less expensive than divorce, which is, I think, where sometimes these things can go. So, thinking about how important it truly is to you and then making a decision about that, really important.
Now, Dinah, we've covered a lot in today's conversation, lots of different tips and tricks, whether it's getting our foundations right with our calendar and our password manager, or how to save a bit of our time and money on groceries. What is the number one thing you want listeners to take away from this conversation, the essence of life admin hacks?
Well, it's not about controlling everything. It's not about being the most organized person. It's really about getting your environment set up so that you make things easier for yourself. So getting your phone and your computer, your system set up so it makes it convenient. So it makes it really easy to do the right thing, because then you'll spend less time on life admin, which is really our ambition. So you'll feel confident and prepared rather than sort of being ricocheting from one task to the next. So really think about making that investment, because it makes a huge difference in the long run.
I love that. And we're all about saving time and money here on the Australian Finance Podcast. Now, if any of these topics interested listeners, you have a fantastic book called Life Admin Hacks and a podcast where you deep dive into all of these topics in much more detail. But is there anywhere else you'd like listeners to check out if they're interested?
Yeah, so if you're interested in going further, you can also check out Art of Adulting online membership. I would be doing a new intake in a month or two. So if you're interested, feel free to sign up for our wait list.
I love that. The art of adulting. It's not a science. It's just something you've got to learn and slowly get better at over time. Wonderful. Well, Dinah, thank you so much for joining us on the Australian Finance Podcast today.
Thanks for having me, Kate.
Thanks for watching this video on the Rask Network. While you're here, don't forget to like and subscribe so you can get videos each and every day on business, finance, investing, and so much more.